The phrase I've heard is our office is technically fine, but people avoid it. And the problem that they're really indicating they have is that the office works on paper, but people aren't coming into the office. They aren't engaging the way you want to, they aren't engaging with the space. So they're not as productive as you would like. They avoid certain areas. That's actually a big frustration. And it's also a huge clue as to what parts of your office are working really well. Like, where do people like to go? If people don't want to go somewhere, they're not going to unless they have to. Ask a few employees, why don't you like using that space? What's wrong with it? How could we make it better? And then that way you're engaging with your employees as well, so they feel like a valued part of your team, which I know you feel they are. What business owners typically do is they add amenities, perks, and the problem with those things is that sometimes it's just not what your employees want. For example, amenities. Let's say your employee base is younger, they're millennials, they're having kids, and so you want to offer a lactation space. That's wonderful, and I'm all for that. But then how do you translate that space so that it helps everyone? In my opinion, that's rather easy. Sometimes you get a headache or you didn't sleep well the night before. You need to make a private phone call and you don't want everybody hearing and you need a private space. That's where an amenity could work out. But if you don't have that typical demographic, well, then that's not going to be a great use of your space. Another amenity that people have tried to implement is a gym. And sometimes that can be met with great success, and other times it just sits there. But if that's not something that's important to them, then that's an amenity that isn't going to be used. And then that's just a frustrating use of your money because it's not being utilized the way you wanted it to. Another item is perks. Sometimes people will put out food like Bagel Fridays. Amenities and the perks, that's a great idea, but that needs to be employee led. They need to come to you. Your managers need to come to you and say, you know what would be great? You know what I've been hearing, and then implement that. Let's brainstorm and think about some other options and think about it a little differently to see if maybe one of these could be a good fit for you, because I love brainstorming. I love investigating different options and working through the pros and cons. I feel that your office space should not be a financial liability or something that you need to pay for. It should really be a business tool. And what I mean by that is, how can it support your employees, how they work, where they work? Everybody works different. Where you are really kind of dictates how you feel, how productive you are. So perhaps they're coming into the office if you offer a hybrid solution because they need to collaborate with people so that they can share ideas efficiently. And then they prefer to be home because they can focus. However, some people, they like to be in the office because when they walk in the door, they know I'm here to work. And so I'm going to give my all. They like the camaraderie. They like the ability to talk face to face with other employees to solve problems. Just because your employees like to work different ways doesn't mean that your office space can't support that work. Another option that could work for you is designing for moments, not hours. And I think that is really fascinating because none of us do the same thing throughout the entire day. For example, when I'm designing a space, my brain sometimes really wants to get into the technical bits that make a project come together successfully. And then I like to go towards the more tactile color finishes, collaborative, talking with other people. And so my job requires two different ways to think, and I like to work in two different areas when I'm doing that. And so a space that would support that is an example of designing for a moment, not for hours a day your employees work. To your employees and say, how do you work during the day? It's a true interest in wanting to understand how they work and how you could create and provide a space that supports the way they work, Some of these ideas might be kind of pie in the sky thinking, and if it is, that's okay. We're just brainstorming here. But I think it would be really interesting to talk to employees and say, how do you want to work? What bucket do you fit in? I want to be in the office. I don't want to be, or I want to come in occasionally. And then when you are in the office, what kind of tasks are you doing? Are you focused? Do you need to collaborate? Are you working with a lot of people? Are you working with a small group of people? What's your favorite place to work? What's your least favorite place to work and why? That could generate a really great office solution for you. Removing friction instead of features. Oh my goodness, this is a good one. So, a lot of times when I've designed a workspace, the workspace is designed based on typicals. So when designers work with furniture manufacturers, especially for systems furniture, they will create typicals. That's a standard work cube. And then we multiply that however many times we need it. That's typically used in early brainstorming parts of the design process. So with that typical, it will usually come with an overhead bin or a shelf. It'll come perhaps with a personal wardrobe. It'll come with file storage. And the person who's going to work there, that typical gets installed and they walk into their new workspace and they're just, excuse me, frustrated because it's not going to support how they work. And that is a friction point. You've given them a workspace that had tons of work surface and storage, but what they really needed was a table to meet, or what they really needed was less workspace, depending on the work that they do. I, for example, need a ton of workspace. My husband's an engineer. He needs just a little bit of workspace. So how do your employees work? If they're just coming in to touch down, they're only going to need a small space. And if you provide a huge workspace, that's a lot of money and real estate you have spent that your employee doesn't need. And so that's where removing friction instead of features can really be an easy and actually really cost-effective way to make your workspace not even technically fine, but literally designed to work. I'm curious, what is technically fine about your office, but people are avoiding it? It's so interesting to see how people work in a workplace and how the best laid plans on paper should work great, but when it comes to the actual application, it just falls flat.